There we go. I can say got it. There we go.
All right. Well, after a few year gap, we are back with Megan Kelly to once again talk about what else kettlebell training.
Else.
Yes, and a very cool development in that regard. But before we get
I
started,
was,
yeah,
when
go
was I
ahead.
last on? I can't even remember. I remember, was it a couple of years ago?
It was either 2020 or 2021.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like we were in a lockdown.
I'm pretty sure we were. That's what makes me think it was 2020
Yeah, I think it
because
was 2021 I have in my head. Yeah.
I just went on like a slate of like I gotta interview a lot of people. Like I
Well,
gotta
yeah,
do.
while I've got free time.
Well, and it's also I need like human contact. It was just so easy to,
Yeah,
and
speak to someone.
it's funny too because I look back, like working for myself, most of my business is online. I'm usually at home most of the day anyway, and I was like, I didn't
Yeah.
realize my lifestyle was called quarantine, quote unquote. It was
Yeah,
just
yeah, you're like, this is my life.
yeah, exactly. I felt mildly insulted, but everybody else was doing it, so I realized, okay, well, you know what? I'm at least not alone,
I'm not
but I
alone
feel like it.
anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what? Last time we had talked about your prodigious swing work capacity, and particularly you were working toward another world record, and you had already
Yes.
achieved one, and you were working on a second one,
I
and now
still
you
am actually.
I'm now, how is that training for that going? Is it like, do
It's
you have a
really good.
particular
So
date in mind that you're going to be doing that?
yeah, so I'm really, really hoping. I've had a few setbacks, but that's just life.
Yeah.
I don't know if like when I last, I think when we last spoke, my dad had died at some point
Yeah.
in the middle of that training. In fact, the reason I wanted to do this today was because it would have been his 70th birthday today. So I thought it was a good thing to do because a lot of it
Absolutely.
obviously revolved around, well, originally was I was doing it to raise money for MS, which is what he died of.
Hmm.
So I thought, what a day to, I know we'd been speaking for a while about it, and I thought, today is the day, this is when I want to do it.
That's good.
So that had happened. That was in the middle of the lockdowns. And then we kind of went back. And I think I won't have spoke about this last time because it hadn't happened yet, but I think my grief was very much delayed because we were in lockdown. So obviously, like, nothing felt real. So I
Yeah.
wasn't seeing it, like we just said, we weren't seeing anyone. So then when I actually did see people, I was like, oh, I'm not seeing my dad anymore. And
Yeah.
that's when it really, I know grief hits you at different stages, but for me and both my sisters, it very much hit us about a year later. So
Hmm.
at that point, I was like, I'm just going to swing. I'm going to carry on swinging, but I'm just going through the motions. I was kind of just doing it. I wasn't particularly, I was making progress, but I was kind of like, I'm a bit overwhelmed at the minute. I don't want to go too far. I'd also just gone back into real life teaching, like face to face. So I was kind of getting my head back around that. So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to keep it at a level for now and just carry on doing it. And then I'll start to peak at some. That's it's a dog being very annoying. Don't watch she's barking at. Give her 1 minute.
Yes, we were talking before you started. You've got a German pointer, and
German
it looks,
pointer, yeah, and she's very, hey Rob, she's just getting very excited at the door, so I don't really know what about.
yes, well, that's okay because dogs are always welcome in the show.
She
They are
she will come on screen in a minute.
great.
She, in fact, she very much heavily features in all my training videos because if I try to do anything at home, she's on me. Um, but so yeah, so that kind of all I was kind of just going through the motions, and then when I went back into that and kind of got to a point where I was like, I'm okay. I didn't know this, but well, my now husband had proposed to me, so I kind of ended up all of the back end of last year partying because we got engaged in November, and in true me and Will style, got married in 9 months. We were like, let's just do it. You don't know what's going to happen. So I still, in fact, my training the last 9 months has been amazing. Even I said to Will throughout every preparation for the wedding, I was like, I am still training, but he very much supports me and loves it that I do train a lot. So I continued, and then I'm very much hoping to go for it in March. That's when all of my plan, everything's going to plan. My training's been going great. I've been playing around recently with had some heart rate strategy testing, which has been really fun actually. It was I've kind of been working out what rep ranges, what weights keep me or stop me from going glycolytic too soon. Because
Hmm.
obviously, at some point in that hour, I will go, and probably within each minute I will, as long as I can get out of it, then it's good. So I'm kind of just playing around with, I'm allowed to use 2 different weights, or I could use 10 if I wanted to. So about 8 months ago, I messaged Pavel Satsaline and said, I'm going to try this, which was basically a combination of weights, or not, I have been trying this. What are your thoughts? And he just said, in true Pavel style, nothing other than genius. That was the response I got. So I was like, I don't need to hear anything else. I was like, okay.
That's
I'd written
praise.
this. I mean, I talk. I'd written this massive email, and then he was like, genius. No other comments. So I was like, take that as good.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
That's heady praise coming from a man like Pavel.
yeah, I was like, okay. So yeah, so at the minute, it's actually, I'm always going to be using the 32, because that is the weight that I have become very able to do. It doesn't feel heavy anymore. So that's one that's always going to be in it. At the minute, I'm playing around with like the 40, the 44, and the 48, and working out which combination of the 2 together. So at the minute, I'm doing it in each minute. I'm doing like 8 on the minute with the 32, followed straight by 2 on the 30 seconds with either one of those weights. And that is working really well, actually.
Very nice.
So it kind of gives me a very well, in terms of my style of training anyway, 25 seconds rest is a very long period of time. So between the 2 reps on the 30, I get a very long time for my heart rate to get back to where it needs to be.
Right on. Now, explain a couple things to the audience, because I obviously you've read Kettlebell Acts. I've read it, and I understand for the most part most of the concepts that are in it. I think it's one of those books you have to read a few times because it's really very cerebral. But you talked about glycolysis or going glycolytic. You talked
Yeah.
about heart rate and the particular rest periods that you have. So when we talked last time, I think you were on, I don't know what the protocol is like that you're on right now, but I remember the one that you were on before. Sometimes you'd be working out maybe 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Are you working out to that long even now? And does it still qualify as acts, given that it's gone past the 40-minute mark?
Yeah, so I am, I was going to say, unfortunately, I am still working up at 90 minutes. So I tend to do that about once a month, because I realise there's actually not really much point me doing it for more than once a month, because that's quite obviously a huge volume, and a lot of my sessions are 60 minutes. So and sometimes it can be sort of 75. It just really depends, but the 90 Pavel would like me to keep in once a month. I actually like it, and I think I've said this quite a few times, in terms of I see it as like a mental challenge, because obviously physically, if I'm doing 90 minutes, it's not particularly intense. So like if I'm swinging a 48, yes, it is. It's a lot of effort, because I weigh 60 kilos, so it is a big percentage of my body weight. But if I'm doing 5 on the minute, if I'm getting like sort of 50 seconds rest, that's a lot, because very often I get 15 seconds rest. So I can get my heart rate down. It tends to stay, like my heart rate for that averagely is about 130 beats per minute. So it's never actually that high. And it does gradually go up to my threshold, which for me, I need to be below 160. But yeah, it doesn't take me, it's not intense as in some of my like 20 when I'm swinging every 30 seconds, that's intense. But mentally is it's a massive challenge, because I know I'm going to be stood in front of this bell for 90 minutes. But what I do, and I might have said it last time, is I meditate. I genuinely use it as like meditation. I'm like, I do it for me early in the morning works best, because I have quite intense days of coaching. So I'll be coaching from like 6:30 till 1, and then so I prefer to just get it out of the way. And by pure chance, the first Friday of every month, one of my students is off. So I use the first Friday of every month. That's my 90-minute session. Starts my month off well. And I kind of just I zone out. I don't have my phone near me. I use my Garmin watch really for heart rate. I don't really, and I kind of know anyway how my body feels, but I do think using a heart rate monitor is interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, I think Pavel actually wrote a line in the book saying, unless you want to go for Megan's record, then you don't need to be doing 90-minute sessions. But um, but yeah, it's more partly so I've got like sort of like stuff left. So when I'm doing 60 minutes, I mean it flies by, which sounds ridiculous, but 60 minutes of swings for me goes quick.
yeah.
um, and then also I guess like mentally it is that big challenge, and if I can stand there, I do feel like I can do most things if I can make myself stand in front of a bell for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that mental side of training is something that a lot of people forget about, particularly when
Mm,
you get into the strength training world, because I know
yeah, yeah,
Pavel's
yeah.
talked about this too. He said, you know, the mental intensity of doing a marathon versus a
Mm,
powerlifting competition is just like the powerlifting competition is just cramming all of that mental intensity into like a
yeah,
15-second,
yeah,
period maybe.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas with marathon, it might be over 2 or 3 hours. And so,
Hours, yeah.
but most people's approach to strength, mine included, is very much like, you stay away from failure.
Hmm.
So for the most part, there's not as much of a mental challenge. And what have you found has been like a carryover with that mental toughness that you get just from, sticking to doing the same thing over and over for maybe 60, sometimes 90 minutes
Hmm.
into other things, not just in your training, but even in life, like in general?
In life, yeah, so in terms of the meditation side, it really that really helps me, even though a lot of people will be like that really would stress me out. For me, that's like my own time. And I think
Yeah.
we were talking about this book, which I know you've just got up next to you, but in the X book, I think Anna Cannington also talks about the meditation, that kind of side of it of training. But
Mhm.
with well, like I just said about my dad, with that even though I know it's completely different. It's two very different things, somebody dying and training. But where I wrote, I mean, I wrote a thing on my Instagram about this when my dad died, that I sort of looked at it and I was kind of thinking too far into the future. So he died, I'm 33 now. He died when I was 29. I was about to turn 30. And I remember thinking like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm not gonna, that's it. I'm not going to see my dad again. I'm not going to see him in my 30s. All of these like very overwhelming normal thoughts, I guess, for when you're grieving someone so close, came into my head. And I sat down and I was like, right, I need to relate this to something I know, and I know
Mhm.
training.
Yeah.
And kind of was like, when I'm overwhelmed, and those 90-minute sessions can be very overwhelming. When I'm overwhelmed, I literally look at the minute in front of me. I'm like, right, I need to do 5 swings. That's it. I just need to do 5 swings, then I need to stop. I need to rest, calm down, then 5 swings again, 90 times. So I
Mhm.
thought of it like that. I was like, right, I'm not thinking about next year. I'm
Yeah.
thinking about today. I'm like, I need to get out of bed. That's all I need to do. Once I'm out of bed, I need to do that. Like, it sounds ridiculous, but I was like, I need to do my teeth. Like, that's just the next minute. And
Yeah.
then I honestly related it like that to my training.
Yeah.
Because I was like, it's the thing I know the best, the most about, is
Certainly.
my not necessarily training in general. And I don't claim to know everything, but about my actual training sessions, I know a lot about.
Right.
So
That's a great piece of advice. I think a lot of people are going to overlook it because
mm,
it seems too simple or it seems like it's not that relevant, but
yeah,
I've heard a lot of people. I've applied it myself. I remember
yeah,
thinking, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I think it was um gosh, there was a guy, I'm drawing a blank on his name. He was a Navy SEAL who was, I think his entire regiment was taken out in a war. He
yeah.
was the only survivor. I think they made a movie about it, Lone Survivor.
Ah, okay.
And if I recall correctly, he said something similar. He said, like he was overwhelmed, dehydrated,
Yeah,
injured, all this other stuff. He's like, all I could think about is like, you just have to do the next thing. You don't have to
yeah.
do
Next
a
thing.
ton of things. Similarly, I saw an interview with Frank Mir, who's a former UFC heavyweight champion.
Yeah,
There was a fight he did where he was with a jujitsu specialist who was like a real tough dude. I mean, it's UFC. Guys
yeah,
choking him out. And people asked him, so, what do you think of like, how am I going to win from here? He's like, no, you're thinking too far ahead. All I
yeah,
had to think about is I got to get my chin out of the way. Okay, I've done
yeah.
that. Now I've got to do this and then this. And so he just goes through the
That,
process to get to the
yeah,
next thing. so many of us, I think, are just so used to kind of the road in front of us is smooth, so we don't
Yeah,
have to think about the next step. It's just like we're on autopilot. But when things get
yeah.
really difficult, you do have to think about that next
Yeah,
step.
you do. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, it's kind and that was the one thing I was like, right, that's all I can do. So I always think like one rep at a time. That's
Hmm.
all I'm doing in my training because I'm like, if one of those goes wrong, I'll kind of be like, that might have been me. Did I just mess up? As in, have I just lost concentration? It might be that I'm getting really tired, but all I look at is that one rep and then another and then another. And usually, if it is the 90-minute ones, like I say, it's 5 or 6 reps on the minute, sometimes a little bit more, or sometimes I'll do something different every 5th minute, but
Hmm.
predominantly it's a heavyweight every 5 on the minute, really. And
Yeah.
I was like, that is overwhelming.
Oh yeah.
And I know a lot of my runners do it, like we talked about with marathons. A lot of people who train with me are runners, the cyclists, and when they've got these long endurance things, they're just like, it's just one foot in front of the other, in front of the other. And I was like, that's all I'm doing as well.
Yeah.
One rep and one day.
Exactly. And I would imagine that after a while of doing that, you kind of start to get back into the groove of things, and then it's easier to be like, okay, I don't have to
Yeah,
think about it as just one rep at a time. Maybe I can think
yeah.
of it now as one set at a time,
Yeah,
or
exactly. And then it's
yeah.
like, right, what is my training month? And then I'm like, right, okay, like this, I'm just focusing on this month.
Yeah.
And then you suddenly like way down the line. And yes, you still have days where it's a bit like you feel a bit like, oh, that's that, but it's kind of a different, obviously grief changes. So it's a different kind of grief. And you kind
Yeah.
of then you're out of that horrible first few months and you can kind of see like the future, I guess.
Mhm.
um which is the same in trade as well. Like I very much think the two were very linked. Like a lot of stuff I apply in training, I apply in my life.
Certainly.
uh, which I think a lot of people who train, once they get into it, they also find the same, I think. And like you
Yeah.
just mentioned those examples.
My experience has been with a lot of people that they they disconnect their training from everything else, not on purpose. They just don't
Yeah,
realize like how many similarities there are with a lot of other things,
yeah,
So it's like I think this is one of the reasons why there are so many like gizmos and gadgets and other doodads in the fitness world because people think, oh, okay, this must be some sort of a shortcut. It's like,
yeah,
well, okay, but if you think about it like as though you're think about it like your job, are you thinking like, oh, well, you know what? I'll just try to outsource this to
yeah,
somebody and then that it's like good luck. I mean
yeah,
the
yeah.
likelihood that it's going
And
to work out is not very high.
yeah, I just recently on Friday night actually had to they're doing I believe a strong endurance like online course.
Hmm.
So Brett Jones had messaged saying, hey, this was back in summer, can you do us a video? Just a like a five-ish minute clip on your training, explain the protocol, explain the benefits and demonstrate. So I was like, yep, fine. Did that back in August, and then he got back to me and said, hey, can you just add a little something on this? So I redid the video on Friday, and I was talking about what I originally was doing was protocol or plan 060 from Strong Endurance,
Hmm.
but Pavel had adapted it. So that's based on snatches, but he'd adapted it to two-hand swings and then lengthened the time from 40 minutes to 90 where I can. And in there, the manual talks about 8 to 12 weeks doing this plan, but longer if possible. So I was making a joke saying, well, yeah, 8 to 12 weeks, but I was like, I have been following this for 3 years and I'm not bored because I have seen all of these benefits. And one
Hmm.
of them was a huge bit I spoke about was the mental benefits, not just kind of routine and getting out of bed and things like that, but just generally being able to apply that toughness that it takes to stand in front of a bell or run a marathon or whatever it is, that taking that into life.
Certainly. Certainly.
And yeah, so but yeah, 3 years with with good reason is what I said, because yeah, I continue to see progress. And I think that's where people go wrong in training. They either don't give it long enough to see progress, they're potentially following the wrong thing, but usually it's that they're messing around and saying, I'll do that for a week, then actually that looks cool, I'll do that. I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, you might get DOMs for a few weeks and that feels cool. But for me, I'd rather be able to train 4 or 5 times a week
Exactly. Oh
and
yeah, I'm with
genuinely
you.
do other things.
You know, I'm curious because you mentioned the mental benefits, which have been huge for you, and of course, you know, there've got to be some physical benefits that go along with it. Are there any, you know, Pavel likes to talk about the what the hell effect, and I'm
Yes.
curious, like, what are some of the things you've noticed? I would bet like a pretty low resting heart rate is
Yeah.
there. What are some of the other physical abilities that you have gained that you didn't expect from this
So
type of
yeah,
training?
the low resting heart rate, my resting heart rate is very low. And generally I don't get ill that often. This year I actually have had flu, but I put that down to the wedding. Will's always like, "Oh yeah, you marry me, and you're saying that's a stress." I was like, "Well, no, I'm saying planning a wedding is stressful
Yeah.
on top of everything else." But yeah, I tend to I mean, I guess because I tend to not train to the intensity that some people like to train to,
Hmm.
very often anyway. So I think I kind of know my body. I kind of know when to back off. So in terms of that, I tend to not get ill very often. The dog is very annoying. Can you hear her whining? Or do you think
Not
that's
yet. No.
oh, good. And then in terms of sleep, this was one of the things I spoke about in the strong endurance clip I did. My sleep is hugely improved. So I mean, I didn't necessarily sleep badly, but I did used to wake up a lot, and I'd kind of be thinking about only work, which I absolutely love, but just sort of like I need to do that,
Mhm.
and my sleep now. I mean, I need about 8 hours minimum. So,
Yeah.
and ideally, I like to have more, but I tend to have a good solid 8 hours sleep. Because I get up so early, I end up like, and I sometimes don't get in till quite late in the evening.
Mhm.
It that kind of throws it off sometimes. But yeah, 8 hours minimum, but that's always quality sleep, which obviously then means I recover well. And then in terms of even just like muscle, like building muscle, I haven't been following anything like in terms of I haven't been deliberately doing hypertrophy, I haven't been trying to build muscle, but like definitely hamstrings, glutes, lats, abs, they are much more. I mean, my glutes and hamstrings are a lot bigger, which is always good. And then yeah, lats and a lot stronger, abs, that's all nice things. But then strength wise, I mean, I tested the other week. I've never had I used to do a lot of barbell work, and I haven't for a long time because I've just been focusing on swings. But a couple of weeks ago I was like, I'm just gonna like just play around. I kind of had a freestyle week where I was like, I'm just gonna test my deadlift. And I only when I did the TSC tactical strength challenge for strong first, I used to always get number one in the category in snatches. And that's who actually someone who from strong first said you should become an SFG. Like, what, how come you can do that? So maybe I have some sort of, I don't know, ability to do it before I trained, but I have always got one in snatches. Then I had like one pull up and 100 kilo deadlifts.
Yeah.
So I mean, I wasn't competitive. I just used to go in and be really competitive in the snatches.
Right.
I tested my barbell deadlift the other week, and I honestly have not touched a barbell. I can't even tell you. I coach it, but I haven't actually trained it. And I just thought I'm just going to generally mess around. And I ended up doing 110 kilo as a, which I could only ever do 100. I haven't touched a barbell, but I guess heavy swings that carry over. And I am definitely more advanced in my strength anyway, just from those last 5-6 years of really focusing on it. So I guess there's that as well. But the heavy swings, so I think they've done the trick there. But and like I say, it's not an amazingly strong deadlift, but for me, that is 10 kilos more than when I actually peaked and trained deadlift.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was fun to play with.
That's very cool. Do you do any other strength training, or is it basically just swings and then you play around with other stuff?
I do get-ups, of course. I absolutely adore the Turkish get-up. And actually, even though people think the swing is my favourite movement, the get-up is my favourite movement. So I love that. And sometimes I'll go heavy, but for me, I tend to just stay around 20-24 kilos with that. And
Mhm.
that's very often in my warm-up. So I would say most days I do that. And I've always, since I've started doing the anti-glycolytic stuff, had sort of push-ups and pull-ups in there, just because I find them extremely useful, but without really taxing me too much.
Mhm.
And then this year I actually started getting into, I wanted to kind of challenge myself in, or push myself out of my comfort zone. So I mean, I always joke about if I like research or assist on the SFG2, me doing a the third bodyweight press is me being out of my comfort zone, but I kind of know I can do it because of I mean, I have to train, but because of my kettlebell experience, I know with 6 months I can kind of build back up to that.
Yeah.
But bodyweight stuff, calisthenics, I mean, it's your thing. It's something that is definitely not something I'm comfortable with. So April this year, one of my friends teaches it in a town near me, and I was like, do you know what? I'm going to go on his workshop and like just play and see. And I've continued to pay him now as a coach. There was a dog being very annoying, so I continue to pay him now. And I've loved learning loads and loads of new skills. So I'm currently working on like handstand things and skin the cat, but it was something for me that I was shocking at. Like, I mean, I'm not great now, but I'm loving being out of my comfort zone. And also it doesn't affect, I didn't want to do any sort of like heavy kettlebell work or heavy barbell work because my focus is swings, but playing around on the rings, playing with pull-ups, like I've loved it. Totally out of my comfort zone, totally new skill.
Yeah.
But so that is kind of my other side of strength that I'm really enjoying now.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think calisthenics is a great addition for the reasons you mentioned.
Yeah.
The other thing, I think the big thing, like you pointed out, is that it's really not as fatiguing. I mean, it's possible to get fatigued from
Yeah, yeah.
calisthenics, but it's like with barbell training, it's like a guarantee.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Like I knew going for that 110 kilo deadlift, I was like, or whatever I was going to, I was like, that's going to knacker me for a while. It did.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Like it was supposed to be a kind of a week off, just a bit of a deload, play around and chill. But calisthenics is, I find it hard in the session. And yes, it's high tension, but you recover from it, don't you? So if you let yourself, I know when to stop myself. I'm like, right, that's enough. Like, I mean, I couldn't even, I had this fear of like when I was younger, I couldn't even do forward rolls, anything like that, because I didn't like that forward movement. So when my coach was like, hey, we're going to learn skin the cat on rings, I was like, what? I can't go upside down. I can't go round. And he was like, well, you're going to have to, because that's what we're going to base the whole thing around. Because I think it'd be really good. And so that was actually great because it really pushed me out of my comfort zone. And it did take me about 3 months. And at one point he was like, right, we're just going to have to do it. You're just going to have to let me push you around. He was like, your grip's fine. Your grip is fine. And your lats are fine. Just do it. So and then after that, I was like, and then I've just really enjoyed. I mean, if you look at my Instagram, it's just the same movement. I mean, there's a lot of other things he's thrown in, but the one I'm most interested in, because it was the most scary to me, is that. But just even hiring the rings and then trying to get that tiny bit more movement, and then going into now, hopefully soon, a German hang. Just that I've really loved. And I've found like, physically that very different, but in a good way. Like I've enjoyed seeing the benefit of doing that kind of training. So
Yeah.
I was happy because I know that's your thing. So
Certainly. Well, I'm very happy to hear you're doing it too. And who did you say your coach is? We'll give him a shout out on the
he's called Charlie. Charlie St. Ledger. He's in Manchester, so he's about 25 minutes from me.
Cool.
But yeah, he's great. He used to be a gymnast, and then he's like, actually, this is a lot on my body, so so I'm going to coach instead. I mean, I guess you do get to the stage where you're either like properly competing or which takes over your life, or you kind of go into more coaching side of it, and it's great.
Good for him for doing that because I did gymnastics as like a little kid. It wasn't competitive. It was just kind of like, extracurricular activity, but yeah, to compete and that stuff is like people don't realize how injurious it can be. I mean, they listen to Mark Rifkin's stories about hurting his shoulder, his knee, all this other stuff. And I mean, he was a really high level competitor. So
It's
Charlie,
so
if you're
good.
listening, you made a good choice.
And then I always say like it's a totally different, like people will be like, whoa, you're so strong, but then I'm like, no, but like people who do calisthenics are like another level, like a completely different strength, which is why I've really enjoyed it, because I'm like, okay, it's completely different to swinging 5 reps on the minute or every third set. It's like a completely different skill.
Oh yeah.
It's it's your body. It's like learning how to create tension where you need to, which is the swing, but completely different. And then I was speaking to Cole Summers. I speak to him a lot, and I was like, I always knew he was strong. I'm always like, you absolute beast, but then when I now, like, my coach has been like, right, we're going to try like some front levers, some banded levers on the rings, but like supporting your hips with a band. We're going to get you comfortable doing that, and back lever. And when I'm like, hang on a minute, Cole can do this, like, and probably you, like, and I'm, I mean, it's a goal, it's definitely a goal, but actually I already had this sort of level of respect, but now I'm like, wow, now I'm doing it, like, it's a totally different level of respect.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, Cole, I remember I remember meeting him actually for the first time at the Naked Warrior certification. This was before
yeah,
Strong First was even announced. This was like maybe a
okay, yeah,
month before. And Pavel was there teaching it, and Cole was a participant. And Pavel had him come up and, demonstrate some things. And it's like, I think, but even then, Cole was in his like maybe early to mid 60s, and he was just doing stuff like it was no big deal. And he wasn't like a former gymnast either. He was like a hockey player, and he's a
yeah.
strength and conditioning coach. He's just crazy strong,
He's
like
he's
unbelievable.
he's just like, yeah, insane.
Yeah.
I was speaking to, because I think he said he'd had a hip replacement recently, so
Mm.
I was like, what's the goal? And he was like, pistol squat. And I was like, good, yeah, do it.
That's
I
a
was
thing
like,
in
I'll
Strong
follow
First.
that.
Yeah, that's a thing with a lot of people in Strong First. I remember when Fabio had his shoulder surgery, he'd hurt muscle in one of his shoulders, so he had to get surgery. And he's like, okay, my goal is to get, I think he said, my goal is to get back to like my 56 or 60 kilo 1 arm military press, and after that, I'll be strong again. Meaning
Yeah.
like until then I'm weak. So
And
pressing a
guess
48.
what? So the dog has been very annoying today.
Yeah, now I can hear the dog.
I
He's
think I was sitting at
very
the door, that's why, but Will's somewhere around, so he can see
okay,
it.
cool. Very cool.
Might have to
Yeah,
wait for
that's
that.
my hope is never to have such a terrible injury like that, but still have the tenacity to chase after such an incredible
And
goal.
there's Will going, Finn, shut up.
It,
I knew Will would go and get the door. He's
well, I'm
somewhere
glad
over.
your dog's name is not Alex, because that would then be confusing. We're like, Alex, shut
Alex,
up.
shut up.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Lucked out. So
Your goal is what? Sorry, the dog has now shut up.
my goal is definitely to keep that level of tenacity,
Yeah.
even as I get
Yeah.
older, and all this other business without, of course, the injury side of the equation.
Yeah.
And let's
I know,
hope.
because someone had said to me the other day on my Instagram, like, is there any reason you're not going any further with Skin the Cat? And I was like, well, the reason is because I'm not good at it. I'm learning it. But I was like, I mean, I'm much improved. But I was like, there is no reason. It's just my goal really is swing. So I was like, I don't really want to go into something that I'm not necessarily comfortable with just for the sake of it. And I was like,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, being actually even able to go around on the ring is a huge, like the level I was at was like, I was really not good.
Yeah.
And I'm still not good, but I'm loving learning it. And I
Nice.
was like, there isn't a reason. It's just I don't want to push myself and then injure my shoulder and then not be able to swing or whatever else.
Yeah.
I was like, that's the thing. I just don't want to be injured.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
The goal is not skin the cat,
Oh,
it's
it's went,
swing
yeah.
the cat.
Sorry, just the Wi-Fi just went, I think, or it froze anyway.
Okay, well, you're back. It doesn't look like there
Yeah,
was any
you're
sort of
back as
break.
well. I don't know how
Good.
much of that you heard, but I just said I don't want to I don't want to push it to the point where I'm injured and then not be able. And I was like, I'm kind of just enjoying it. I'm not trying to compete in Skin the Cat or
Exactly.
be any elite level in calisthenics. I'm just playing.
Yeah. And
And
people forget
I
if
was like,
you're
I was actually trying to show on my Instagram that actually, like, yeah, you might think, yeah, you're really good at this, but I was like, I'm deliberately trying to put myself out there and be out of my comfort zone, and
yeah.
I'm not trying to show anything other than that.
Yeah, and it's good for people to see too that there are things that you're trying to learn because a lot of
Yeah.
times people think because I get questions like this all the time. I've been asked like, "Hey, would you be able to write like part of my program with barbells?" And I'm like, "No." Because I just don't understand. Like I know how to lift barbells, I know how to do
Yeah.
the basic movements. I'm not
Yeah.
terribly bad at them, but I don't have the same depth of knowledge as I do with kettlebells and calisthenics.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't feel right taking your money to do
Yeah.
that. But people think because you're good at these other things, then clearly you must also be good with this and that. And it's
Yeah.
like it's good for people to know that
I
like
think
no,
it's
I'm a
good.
student with some things.
Yeah, and if you're a coach, I really think it's great to be coached. And yes, I do go to Strong First things and I get coached, and I love learning. But again, it's something that I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm really comfortable. Like I don't go. I obviously go in. I'm not like. I don't go in like, yeah, I know everything, but I go in and I'm comfortable with that company, with who I'm surrounded by. Like I sort of like I have some level of knowledge, whereas with calisthenics, I have no level of knowledge. So just being coached and enjoying that and being a student in a different way. Like I find that, yeah, I'm glad I've done it. It's something that was one of my goals of the year, was to do something I was not comfortable with, and this is it.
That's
And I
good.
don't stop. I'm enjoying it, like I say, because it isn't affecting. I kind of wanted something to do that wasn't going to affect, and I thought barbell does. Kettlebell, yeah, that I don't thought I can't really dedicate so much time to sort of like heavy pressing, because again, it does take it out of me. And I was like, I do goblet squats in my warm up and stuff, but I was like, I kind of not really bothered about going for a big heavy barbell back squat. And then I thought, actually, the obvious answer is calisthenics, because I do pull-ups and push-ups as standard. And yeah, and again, it's not something I'm particularly strong in, but it's very useful, and I enjoy learning more about it.
It's
So
great. So you think the next big thing you're going to do is going to be to do as many pull-ups as possible so that you're the world record.
yeah, world
Uh,
record in pull-ups.
yeah.
Have you seen how long my arms are?
Oh, mine too. I've got of this albatross wingspan, you know.
Yeah,
I'm still obsessed. I still do them anyway.
yeah, I mean, I love it. I'm like, yeah, it's just harder for me.
Yeah.
I like it. But yeah,
Yeah, it's funny. I never really thought about it. I always thought, oh, you know what? I got long arms. So, monkeys have long arms and they're good at pulling stuff. Ergo, this must be an advantage. So, yeah, I think a lot of times it just really depends on your perspective of it.
yeah, totally,
But
yeah.
technically speaking, yeah, if you've got a longer route to travel, it's going to be a little bit more challenging for sure.
But then I'm like, it's fine. It works great for swings and snatches.
Absolutely. So, where can people follow you online to follow your training and maybe keep an eye on your upcoming world
Yeah,
record
record.
attempt?
So my Instagram is mostly where I post that, which is Megan Kelly 1, which you've got. So
Of course.
that's where I mostly post my training anyway. I kind of need to get back to, I was saying this the other day, to actually posting on my grid, because I very often post stories, but I don't know if that's where social media is going now. It seems to be a lot more instant, doesn't it? But I've managed to stay off TikTok. Uh, yeah, it's all good.
Yeah,
But
good.
in fact, Will, the other day, I was like, this is when we know we're in our mid-30s. He was like, what is tic tac? I was like, tic tac. I was like, it's TikTok. I was like, God, we're at that age where we're like, what is this?
You're mispronouncing things and
But yeah, I've posted my story a lot, and then and then there's obviously the book, which I'm in a little bit. I helped with the Pavel sent it me saying, hey, can you add your experience to this book? And I kind of got sent this Word document where I was like, what is this?
yeah.
And it was just like Kettlebell Acts version 1. In fact, I don't think it was even called that yet. It was called whatever. And so I was kind of just editing this Word document and then thinking, this can't actually be happening. Like, how am I adding some sort? And he was just like, well, you've done it for years. And he was like, he said, I don't really care who's doing what, who's lifting what, but it's like, you've stuck at this kind of program for a long time. So what are your thoughts? And there were bits where I was like, I don't necessarily agree with that. Which I think over time I've just built more confidence, I guess, with saying that, because it would be something like 10 years ago where I'd be like, whoa, Pavel, whatever Pavel said. But he was like, I want you to tell me, like, do you agree with what I'm saying? So we kind of had like bits and pieces about like the hands ripping. I'm like, yeah, obviously, ideally they don't rip. He was talking about them ripping because someone was trying to pull up the bell. And I was like, I mean, I look at it as if someone's losing power. So with my students and myself, if I'm losing hip power, then I ripped my hands. It's not that I'm trying to pull the bell up. That isn't the actual thing. I was like, I'm pulling it up because I've lost power. And he was like, do you know what? I actually hadn't thought of it like that. And I was like, that's the only way I think of it. Whereas he was like, I just thought a strong man pulling it up. And I was like, I couldn't pull a 42 or 32 up with my hands, but it happens when I start to lose hip power. So just stuff like that. So I was kind of adding like that kind of it. And then also my own experience of physical, mental benefits and reading other people's opinions as well, like Anna Cannington, and I think Mike Torres is in there. It's quite and it's just been very interesting. I've learned a lot from that too. And kind of his idea of kettlebell acts and what it is and what it isn't.
Some great insights. I have to say the only thing that I would say to Pavel if he'd asked me for my opinion, and I'm sure he'd be like, I'm not going to go with that name, but thank you anyway. I look kettlebell axe. I'm like, oh, it should be kick axe, make gains. That would be a great title.
That'd be great. I
Yeah,
know, because
but
then I was like, he's putting that thing, Megan Kelly, the face of the axe or whatever. And I was like, now people are literally messaging me joking, but saying axe face. I was like, yeah, axe face. I was like, I don't really want to be the face of the axe.
like a horror movie title, like, oh,
Yeah, I'm
it's
like,
axe
axe
face.
face.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I'm nice. I'm not.
Or well, there's that term too, like, referring to your wife as a battle axe or whatever. Like, can
Yeah.
you not refer to me as an
I know
axe at
that's what
all?
Will said. Will was like, yeah, battle axe. I was like, yeah, this
The
this
kettle axe.
title.
That's
I was
the
like,
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah,
okay.
I titles aside, I don't think you're a battle axe, but I do think kick axe make gains. I'm just saying, Pavel, I'm sure you're not listening to
Battle.
this
Yeah.
podcast, but if you were, I would just say that would be a really fun title.
Yeah,
But I don't
Pavel,
think
if you're listening.
it's too late for that in any case. But
But yeah,
uh
that book, I mean, I asked him at the start, I was like, is it supposed to be like, what is this book? Because he didn't have the title. And I definitely didn't suggest a name.
yeah,
He was kind of like, it's kind of, I guess, strong endurance, like in the style of for dummies, but it's not,
yeah,
obviously not for dummies. But when you kind of when you look at it, he definitely has simplified is really helpful, I think, because I think this is how I like got more sort of people following me on Instagram, because I tried to simplify strong endurance, because I was like, actually, if you take the main points from strong endurance, it is learning to get to know your body, learning if you're going off heart rate, what your heart rate needs to be at, and learning the physical symptoms or side effects that you get from going above that heart rate. And I was like, that's it. Like, I don't understand all the biochemistry in it. Like, I've got a little bit of knowledge about it, but what he explains in that book is pretty much the level of knowledge I need. I'm
mhm,
not a biochemist. I don't need that level of knowledge to be able to successfully perform it. And I think people look at strong endurance and they're like, oh, it's a bit, and actually it isn't. If you take the main points from it, you don't need to know all of the, like, yeah, having a general knowledge of the science behind it, good, but you don't need to know like the amount of depth he goes into unless you want to. So I was trying to prove that point, because I was like, that's not again, it's not something I'm good at. I'm not really that knowledgeable about biochemistry, but I can do strong endurance
yeah.
successfully.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, well, I highly suggest that everybody follow Megan. Megan Kelly 1. I'm going to put her
You.
Instagram handle on in the
And you
show
also get
notes.
to see this a lot. I don't know if you can see the dog. She's down here, there.
Oh.
This is
Yes, you
what you get to
promised
see a
earlier,
lot
so
on my
there she is.
Instagram. If you like dogs, it's the place to be.
If for no other reason than because you like dogs, folks, you should follow
Just
Megan
follow
Kelly.
me.
She's got a very nice
And
German
hiking. I
Terrier.
do a lot of hiking, so you might get to see some nice mountain views.
Very nice. Very cool. I do. Now here's the real question. Do you guys hike on the right side of the trail or the left side?
We left. Which one what do you do left?
I'm
Yeah,
just asking because I know we drive on the opposite sides of the road. When I've been
yeah,
to Australia in the past, that always blew my mind. I felt like,
they're on the
like
same.
first time I'm in a car, I'm like, I'm in the wrong seat.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
they're on the same side as us, aren't they?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Hence my
I
curiosity.
When I went to Italy, I was going, it might have been for strong endurance. I was going for something in Italy. Or it may have been strong, is it resilient? Strong with Pavel Macek's course.
Yeah, yeah. Strong
Um,
first resilient.
anyway, it's beside the point. I was driving around a roundabout, and then I suddenly realised I was on the wrong side for Italy anyway. I was driving around it the wrong way around. And then instead of actually doing the sensible thing and just being like, let's get off this, I decided to stop in the middle of the roundabout, because I was like, I just need to like kind of get my head around this. And
Yeah.
my friend was in the car like, move! Why are we in the middle of an Italian roundabout? And I was like, they do drive like idiots, so I suppose I'm driving like them.
I bet you learned some pretty cool Italian swear words very quickly from the other drivers.
Yes. I mean, half of them were kind of waving.
Yeah.
Others were, yeah, definitely like, I don't know what they were saying, but yeah, I presume it was swear words.
It's
But yeah,
highly
there's a
probable.
story about, I
It's
am normally a good driver, I promise.
sure if it's on the correct side of the road for you, but if it's on the other side, I would
But I
be the
guess,
same
do they
way.
drive on the same side as you?
They do, yeah.
Yeah,
The
so you'd
right
be
side.
fine in Italy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, for sure. The only thing would be, of course, the drivers. I remember A couple years ago, I was in Rome visiting a friend of mine, and I
Yeah.
was just blown away by like how crappy the streets were because, and he pointed this out too. You know, this is not a matter of pride
Yeah.
amongst the Romans. He's just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it looks like they never even fixed the streets after they got bombed out in World War II. There was some crew that was filling a pothole, and he drove by, and he's like, "It's a miracle." And they're like, "Oh, there are more people up there filling more potholes," and he's like, "This is incredible." So yeah, I'm
Oh,
assuming you were
well,
in what Vicenza for the
oh, Vicenza, yeah, that's where we were. Yeah, we go to Italy about once a year. Sometimes
yeah,
I go with Strong first, but I just love the food in Italy. So and it's only
oh,
for
no,
us 3 hours on a flight. So every year, even if it's for a weekend, we go to Italy. And
amazing.
I was in Sicily this year with Will, and he said, I finally decided I know how to drive in Italy. And I was like, why? What's the trick? And he just said, you just need to drive like an absolute idiot. If you try and be polite, like in England, we're like, yeah, come through, let
Yeah,
them through. They kind of drive at each other. And he was like, just do that. And it's fine.
yeah,
And the minute he started driving like that, I was like, oh, everyone respects you.
yeah. They're
I'm
like,
just
he's a
don't be
local.
polite and it works.
Exactly,
I mean, I
exactly.
think we are probably too polite in Britain, but with that anyway.
Probably, I think on the road it's a little bit better because people are behind 2 tons of steel and glass, and all of a sudden they get all this courage that they would not have had
Yeah, road
otherwise.
rage.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I know in America it can be like that. I'm always very polite, let people in, stuff like that. But I've also driven in the Mediterranean before, and I know that
It's
certain things you
interesting.
just, yeah, you gotta throw
That
out the
also
window.
makes you mentally stronger.
Drive
Yeah,
90 minutes. Yeah, you took
yeah,
90 minutes to swing. Do
no.
90 minutes of driving in the
90
Mediterranean.
minutes,
You'll
yeah.
be, yeah, yeah,
But yeah,
you'll be as mentally tough as anyone.
I'm yes. So I'm hoping that yeah, March time, that is it. That's the record.
Good deal. Well, I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. I'm looking forward to hearing how everything goes. And Megan, thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you so much for asking me, and for Elizabeth, who I know does work with you as well as me. And thank you for her for mentioning it again.
Absolutely, absolutely. The lovely Miss Elizabeth, as I call her, she was the one who suggested that we hop back on this podcast. So thank you very much,
I'm
Elizabeth.
seeing her tomorrow, actually. So yes, I'll thank her in person as well.
Yes, send her my regards as
I
well.
will.
Yes. And folks, as always, have fun and happy training.